Welcome to today's Table Talks. My name is Scott Kappelman, and I'm joined by my two co-hosts. One is Tyce Lawbinger on the far end of the table from me. How are you, Tyce?
I'm doing really good.
Good. And then our second co-host is Clark McGehee, who's now in the middle. How are you doing, Clark?
That's right. I'm feeling great.
You've got your own camera now.
I do. I have an individual camera. Tyce and I aren't sharing. We've had some studio updates.
Yes.
So.
We've gone into 2025. We were able to buy another camera, which allowed each of us to have a camera, so you guys didn't have to sit right beside each other.
Yeah.
Which at
we
times
were tight.
probably felt a little tight and awkward.
It did, especially just talking to him, because it was like I would look at him and then just be talking in his ear a little bit. So,
Yeah.
but
It's also good because now if I space out, y'all can't see when I space out.
yeah, true. Yeah, you always had to be locked in when the camera's on. Both
That's
of you.
right.
So,
Exactly. All right. So today, if you're watching our video, we're excited that you've joined us. We're going to be doing a 3-part series that includes today and the next 2 episodes. And the topic that we're going to be talking about is how, as parents, you can choose which school you would like for your child to attend. And so today's episode is going to answer the question, should Christian parents choose to homeschool their children? Next episode will be, should Christian parents choose to send their children to a Christian school? And then the third episode is, should Christian parents choose to send their child or children to a public school? So we're going to cover all 3 areas, and that'll be the emphasis for the next 3 episodes.
hopefully we still have some listeners once we're done with all 3 of the episodes.
And we know people are going to have differences of opinion on this. We're just going to try to cover it in different ways to try to lay things out. The main thing we want to say, there's one key thing we want to give you every episode, and that is that each set of parents has to make the final decision on the type of education your child receives. We're not trying to influence your decision. We're just trying to give you information and have a good, solid discussion about each one of these options. So it's your choice at the end of the day, and we're just facilitating the discussion, hopefully between you and your wife, or you and your husband if it's a wife watching this.
Or
what?
That was a good catch.
Oh, yeah. I just assumed it was all men watching at first, and that's not the truth. We probably have more women who watch.
We probably do.
I wish we had the statistics on that. That would be very interesting.
So I might could give them to us.
We might could. That's true.
Statistics guy.
All right, so let's start. What is your school background? We'll start with Tyce. Where did you go to school?
Yeah, so I was public school my whole life. I went to Bedford Elementary when I lived in Kentucky. And that was amazing because even though I was in kindergarten, we only had half-day kindergarten.
Half day?
Yeah, it was awesome. So, and we had a recess when we got to school and when we left school. So, I mean,
wow,
you fit in all of what you learn in kindergarten in a half day, and we got 2 recesses. So
that's a great deal.
Yeah, really great. So I left after lunch. There was an option to start at lunch and go to the afternoon. I'm not sure why we didn't pick that option because my sister had. I mean, it makes sense to pick us both up at the same time, but I ended at lunch most days. So, yep, but it was good. And then when we moved to Missouri, I went to the same school district from first grade on till I graduated. So,
but it was a public school.
It was a public school. It was a small. Well, I say it was smaller because in where I was from, it was a small school in the area. But then when I talked to people here, it was actually massive. So I graduated with about 170.
As far as 170 graduates.
170 graduates at once. And I thought that was tiny because the schools that all went to my dad's church, the school over from us was graduating 300 something at a time, and the next school over was 400 to 500 at a time. So we were definitely very small comparatively.
Right. All right, Clark.
Yeah, that's not my story. I think Tyce is probably talking about me whenever he said this smaller schools. So I did go to public school all my life, the same school, Franklin County Public School, which is in the southwest area, right between Lincoln County and Adams County, or Amite maybe. It's kind of in the central. It's between quite a lot of counties. But I graduated with 60 in my graduating class. And much smaller. It was always everybody knew everybody in the school. Like you could name anybody from Franklin County, and I'm sure I knew who they are, and I'm sure I know who their parents are, and if they have kids, who their kids are. It was a very small community, but it was also a public school my whole life. So.
Okay, so I went to a public school as well. I graduated from Holka High School. I actually started at Eastward Elementary in Gulfport, Mississippi, and it was right at the beach. and Highway 90 was the only barrier between our school playground and the beach. So as we were playing on that playground, we could see the waves rolling in at the beach.
Wow.
So that was kind of cool. I went there first, second, and half of third grade. Then we moved to Holka, and that's where I finished up when I graduated in 1988. Now, Tyce, yours had 170, yours had 60.
That's right.
My graduating class had 27.
Wow.
So I went to a very small public school.
Yeah, that is very true.
So that was my experience as well. All right, the reason I want to bring that up is obviously with us all three coming from a public school background, I felt like it's important for our audience to know that. And
I
we're
agree.
going to try to talk about things that we were not a part of when we talk about homeschooling and Christian schools.
Yep.
And then we all have a personal experience with public school, but I just want to kind of put that out there at the beginning. So let's talk a little bit about homeschool. Was homeschooling an option in your area, Tyce, Clark? And was it popular?
Well, that's a hard question because it is such a small community. So I can probably think of about 4 people who were homeschooled, but of the 400 in the town, I mean, maybe that's, a
Very small percentage.
Right, it is. Yeah, it was a pretty small percentage. I did not know very many people who were homeschooled, but I do think it was an option. It would never have been an option for my parents, I don't think. I don't think they just would have done it. My mom was a teacher in the public school, actually, and she was an elementary teacher, and she would always joke and say, once you get past elementary, I don't know anything. So
Right.
she would say it wasn't an option for her, but...
Right. What about in Missouri?
When I was young, co-ops weren't as big of a thing. And so as far as if you were going to be homeschooled, you were going to be like at home doing your school. So, but it was probably more of an option than I thought it was. Not that I had to pick; it was my parents were discussing it. But from bits and pieces I've picked up, my parents definitely discussed homeschooling for a while.
Oh, they did discuss
They
it.
did discuss it, but ultimately, you know how it is being on a preacher salary alone. You don't make a lot of money. So my mom ultimately did end up going to work, and that was for the best
Yeah.
for us as a family.
Well, I do not honestly remember anybody in our community ever doing homeschooling. Now,
Really?
there might have been somebody out there that I didn't know, but I think in the time period in which I was going to school, that was not really an option, at least in our area.
Mm-hmm.
My mom, like yours, was an elementary school teacher, so she taught in the public schools, and not always in the one that I was attending. She did transfer as I got a little bit older to our school, but she taught at a neighboring public school. But I just don't remember anybody talking about homeschooling when I was going to school at that time.
I guess I knew some people that were homeschooled. It wasn't necessarily an option for me, but I do now that I hear what y'all are talking about. We had some friends that were pastors that they homeschooled their kids.
Really?
Or just people that worked in the ministry. I've never really met anyone that got homeschooled unless their family was in ministry.
Right.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't meet many non-ministry homeschooled kids.
That's interesting.
But yes, I do distinctly remember.
The only people I remember talking about homeschooling when I was growing up were missionaries when they came back.
Mm.
And their only option, other than sending their child to a boarding school, which might be another country away, was to do homeschooling. So my assumption as a child was only missionaries homeschool their children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that
That's
was
funny.
because of my information or lack of.
Right.
So,
Yeah, we tend to think just based on what we've been given, you know. So.
Uh-huh.
And that's a wildly different statistic than where we live today, right?
Yes.
In the community we're in now, which is Starkville, Mississippi, we have a huge homeschooling group, I would say. You know,
Yes,
as
we
far
do.
as the percentage-wise goes, I don't know. But I just think I know, just in the youth group here alone, we have a massive amount of homeschoolers that come. And it's much more popular today.
Yeah, I would say in Starkville it is a lot more popular, but it's also growing in the nation as
It is.
well, especially since COVID. I think the numbers of homeschooling parents has increased dramatically since COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So-
think co-ops have also helped with that, which I know isn't quite homeschool, but
No, I agree with
So
that.
talk about co-ops real quick.
so basically where, and I can be corrected, you might know a little bit more
No,
than I do.
I'm kinda curious
So
to hear
basically
this.
what I understand is a co-op, and I might be saying this very wrong, and if a family that is in co-op might say something different, but it's where the homeschool groups go together. Like this family homeschools, this family homeschools,
Okay.
this family homeschools, and now we meet at a secondary location.
Okay.
And maybe there's a teacher, an actual teacher that teaches. But most of all the homework and maybe like the video lessons are all done at home. But then once a week, twice a week, they'll meet together.
Okay, that makes sense. My wife and I had a conversation with a young man not too long ago, and he said, I think when he was going to school, he was living in Tupelo growing up. He went to one of those co-op schools 2 or 3 days a week, and then he was at home the other days of the week, and his mom taught him. Yeah. Or they used a homeschool curriculum. Yeah. So, which
is becoming completely off topic. This is becoming really big for teachers because I know a lot of teachers are leaving schools because of classroom management. And now they're like a contract nurse where they can basically, this is how much I'll get paid and I'll teach your kids in the co-op. So it's becoming very appealing for teachers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Is this just another private school?
Maybe at that point it might be, but we'll see. We'll get to that.
Right. Yeah, okay. All right, so before we go any further, I think it would be good for us to share a few scriptures that might have a connection to the importance of the educational process in general. So do y'all have a few that you want to share? I made a list, but I don't want to use all of them on today's video. I'll save a few for each of the other episodes coming along, but any that you want to share?
You can go ahead.
No, I'm going to be totally honest. I saw how many Pastor Scott said, and I said, but he's got it covered. He's got it down pat.
I do have one. I don't understand your first one, and I'm interested for you to talk about that one.
Okay, so I'll start with the first one. It's in Genesis. I've got mine ordered on the page in front of me on my screen, which the people watching can't see, but I can see. But the first one was this. It was Genesis 1:29, and this is going to be a little stretch, Tyce, but I hope it'll make sense. This is where it says, God also said, look, I've given you every seed-bearing plant on the surface of the entire earth and every tree whose fruit contains seed. This will be food for you. Now, that has nothing to do with education.
I was like, I had no idea when you wrote that.
So the point is, God created an earth, and that earth was not fully finished. And so there was seed in certain plants, and there was seed in certain fruit-bearing trees. And it was up to Adam and Eve to cultivate those seeds out, to continue the process of realizing the full potential of what God's creation could be. So in the same way parents are given children, they have incredible potential, but they have to be cultivated to reach the potential that God has given them. So it's moving from the plant world to the physical world, if you will.
Right.
But I do think as parents, in a similar way, our charge is we've been given this child. The child is a gift from God. The child has a lot of potential. It may be potential for music. It may be potential for sports. It may be potential for knowledge. It may be potential for being an aerospace engineer.
Right.
And it's up to us as parents to cultivate and bring that potential out. And I think education, whether it's homeschool, Christian school, or a public school, is a part of that process of bringing the child's full potential out. Does that make a little bit of sense?
It does. I think that's very good wisdom.
Yeah, I was not getting there. I just saw the verse.
Sorry, I had to make the leap for you, but that was my... Have you got a verse, though, Tyce?
I do have a few. I'm looking at verses. A lot of them may have to do with what we get into later, because like Isaiah 54:13, all your children shall be taught by the Lord, and great shall be the peace of your children. And so we'll get into a little bit more about that when we talk about the purposes maybe behind homeschooling or private school in the next episode of where the Lord gets involved. So maybe the verses are there. There's a lot in Proverbs, though, about teaching your children. And while I fully believe that Proverbs is part of the Bible, my saying is Proverbs are not promises. And so I'm more hesitant to go there when I am trying to prove a point to someone, because there's a lot of verses about teaching your kids, but just because you teach them doesn't mean this is going to come true what the proverb finishes. And so it's good advice is what a proverb is. It's wisdom from the Lord, but...
Okay. So we're going to have a table talk on this. I've heard you mention this a couple of times.
Yeah. So I
love Proverbs. So
I know, and I do too. And I do truly love them. But I mean, there are times.
So for example, Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it.
Yeah.
I had that in my list.
Yeah.
And so we are to train and give them a start.
We are.
Pointing them in the direction that they need to go. And I think education is a part of that as well.
I agree. Yep. So, and I mean, another verse to go with that. Oh, I just lost it. Proverbs, 13:24, whoever spares the rod hates his son, but whoever loves him is diligent to discipline him. And that goes beyond just like spanking your child. I mean, the same thing is true with education. It is a discipline in itself and learning. And so there are it's true that we should be disciplining our child,
Right.
not just because they're in trouble, but discipline them in education. And you need to sit down, you need to read, you need to learn. So,
Well, probably my favorite verse that has to do with education in general is Jesus grew in wisdom, stature, and in favor with God and man. So Jesus he grew up like us. He was fully human.
Yep.
So he grew in wisdom, and that meant he had to be educated along the way at some level. Now, he's still God in the flesh, and that's a profound mystery that I can't explain today.
Right.
But he was a growing, developing young man as a child, and that it had to include some
Something.
educational training.
Yeah.
Of some kind.
Right.
Okay.
So-
And he obviously went to public school too. I'm just kidding.
Okay, so those are some biblical basis, if you will, for education. So let's think about homeschooling. Why do you think parents choose to homeschool? I have my own list,
you do have your own thoughts. And
but I'm going to let y'all go first, and then I'll pick the ones I want out of my list.
Right. I might even steal a few from your list because
Okay,
I've
that's
looked
fine.
at it already
We'll-
and I agree with them. But I think some of it is just fear. A lot of it comes from being afraid of the unknown. You know, it's 8 hours a day that they're not with their child, and they're like, man, that's a long time. You know, and I can sympathize with that idea. You know, you want to be there for them. You want to make sure they're being taken care of. And they just kind of struggle to let go. Does that make sense?
I
And
had
this
in my
is
list,
from a non-parent,
could it be
but-
that a parent struggles with control issues
Yeah.
and they want to be there constantly?
yeah, I think off that note, there's probably some parents who experience a pretty poor education as far as, not education, but time in school. Maybe they were bullied and they just don't want their kids to have to experience that.
I think that's a really
and
good
that's just
point.
like there's a PTSD. I know that's a pretty big word. Like it might not be that far, but there is this. I mean, they had trauma in school, maybe from bullying, maybe from a teacher, whatever it might be, and they just don't want their kids to have to go through it. They want to give their kids a better life. So
That's good.
There maybe is a misunderstanding that they can teach more scripture to them, to teach more biblical principles, biblical attitude, a biblical worldview is a good way to say it, to be able to cultivate that biblical worldview. And I would say through conversations with you, I have come to understand that that is a inaccurate description maybe of homeschooling versus another option, because while you do maybe have more time with them at home to talk about the Bible, they do get the opportunity, and this is going to go into public schooling a little bit, but get the opportunity to see so many different things in the public school, and then you can tackle those situations at home. So just maybe a misunderstanding that they could teach more scripture and cultivate a biblical worldview better, and maybe not a misunderstanding. You know, I don't have any kids, so I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet.
also, there's just with that, and we're not talking about public school. We're not talking about that right now. But you also do have to take time, and you got to teach your kid. If you're going to homeschool them, I mean, they have to do the classes. They can't just. It's not seminary. Homeschool's not a time just to do Bible. You do have to teach them.
That's true.
Everything
You-
else,
You
so.
actually have to know what 1 + 1 is, and those kind of things.
Yeah.
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 Another reason I might have is maybe they don't. So you have on yours the school's teaching liberal doctrine, and I think I know where you're going with that. But some parents are just like, I want my kid to be able to go and explore. And they can learn science being outside, not science sitting and listening to someone go through charts. And so I do know some parents who that's the reason they homeschool, is because not necessarily the doctrine is just teaching method, and they would rather their kids be outside or do these lessons a certain way than what the school can do with 35 kids in the classroom. That's a public school number. Most private schools don't have 35 kids in the classroom, but there's just a lot of classroom management that has to happen in a school that doesn't have to happen at homeschool.
Yeah.
So
That's good. So I do want to say my youngest sister homeschools her children, and my middle sister has been a teacher in a Christian school for probably, I don't know, going on 20 plus years. And my youngest sister's been homeschooling from the start. My middle sister is retiring this year, and she's going to homeschool her children going forward. She has one that'll be maybe 10th grade next year and one that'll be 3rd grade next year. She has a younger son who came along a little later in life. So I have the full spectrum in my own family with homeschool, Christian school, and public school. And our kids, Kelly and I, our kids went to public school. They graduated from Starkville High. graduating classes anywhere from 340 to 375. So they had big school experience. So I've seen a little bit of all of it, and I do have biases, and those I'm not going to get into those a whole lot. I do favor public school, but I have seen, and these are my negatives about why some people could choose them. I do find that sometimes parents may choose to homeschool because they have some prejudices against other ethnicities, and that can drive them to make those choices. You mentioned classroom management or a lack of classroom management opportunities, and so I do think some parents have fears that their kids will be corrupted by other kids that are not managed well in a school environment. I do think some parents, and I think the media may promote this more than anything, depending on which radio stations and internet sources you turn to, there's a fear that there's liberal doctrine at every turn in the public school. And so out of fear, they're going to hold their kids out of that environment. Sometimes parents think they know more than the people in the school district. And so because they think they know more, they're going to try to give their kid a better education. In a few instances, the parents choose this route because they're undisciplined themselves. And to get out of bed and get their kid to school at the same time every morning is a challenge. Or to be there every afternoon and pick them up is a challenge because there's a lack of discipline in the parents' part. So to homeschool them, parents can sleep as late as they want. They can keep their own schedule as much as they want, and then they can have their kids at their disposal on their schedule. And that's a limited number of people I've seen, but I have seen that a couple of times. There's an undisciplined part on the parents' part.
Right.
So,
well, real quick before we move past this,
yeah.
and I know might be a longer episode, but this just came into my mind. I do think that me being through the education system, I graduated with a secondary education degree, and going through it, I think there is an argument for the school system doesn't, uniquely meet the needs of your student. Like for me, my brain goes 100 miles a minute, and it's not really visible on camera, but literally every second I'm tapping my legs or I'm moving around like this, and you probably can't tell by watching.
That's why we left you in the middle with these new cameras, so you could be moving back and forth.
That's right, and nobody even knows.
Started. Yeah.
But so I do think that they are trying to fix that. We learn that kind of thing in the class in education, but it is very difficult to meet the needs that every student needs, especially if you have a class of 25 students. So I
appreciate you putting that in there because I have heard this discussion mentioned that a lot of schools really focus on their upper level students who are high academic achievers, and then they provide a lot of remedial help for students that are at the bottom to catch them up, but there's not a lot that's done for the middle group.
This is true. And state tests are designed actually.
Yeah, for that purpose.
Yeah.
And so, some people say, well, my kid's probably in the middle, and it would be best to homeschool because if he or she's in the public school or a Christian school, he or she will get lost in the middle.
Yeah.
And there's some truth to that.
I think there's also truth to that if your child has special needs. There's something going to happen.
That's a very good point.
That is, there's
depending on the school district you're in, for sure.
Some school districts, that's the best thing that can happen because they're just going to be cared for in so many ways. But others, it is probably the much better option to homeschool.
Yeah.
Than to
which is again why this is descriptive and not prescriptive. What we're talking about right now, we're not giving you a prescription or this is what you should do for your children.
And I think that would be my first encouragement why I wanted to start here. There are so many reasons why people can choose homeschooling, and my encouragement for those of you watching is figure out what your real rationale is. Because if you're asked, you should be able to communicate, like, I chose homeschooling for this reason, and you've actually thought through why you've done this.
I think that's really good.
And so I've given you negative ones, y'all have given some positive ones, and I think when you mix those together, as a parent, you've thought through the motivation for driving you to this homeschool decision. And if you find the one that fits you, great, go for it.
Right.
So anyway, those are just some things. All right, what are the benefits of homeschooling? Let's move to that.
Sure. So I think truly homeschooling done right, and this is where maybe we'll disagree a little bit because you say your preference is public school. I think homeschooling done right can be the best option because you do get that individual need met This is something that, again, as a non-parent, I don't exactly have it all figured out, even to communicate exactly what you're talking about. And Annabeth and I have said that we want to take it a year at a time and decide each year what's the next system going to be. But I just want to make that case again for knowing exactly what your individual student needs. And another benefit is you do get to, although it's not seminary, I was having a conversation. I'm now in seminary, and I was having a conversation with Annabeth, my wife, who was homeschooled. I should have added that in, but my wife was homeschooled, and I was talking to her about some church history, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I know all about that." And I was like, "What? Like how? That's crazy." And she said, "Well, I learned it in school." So, and that was certainly something I could have learned outside of school, but it does give you a unique avenue to be able to, while you're learning math and science and all these things, to be able to talk about the Bible some. So,
yeah.
You got others?
No. Well, I have your other one. The family has a lot of freedom to do unique things. I think that's huge. While Brooklyn was not homeschooled, being military, they moved around a lot. And when they were overseas, something that was really big about their school was part of their education was going to see things. And so it was not counted against them if the family took a trip to go look at architecture or go look at all these European countries. And that was just something that most public schools don't give you. And that was private, and that was I can't remember the name, but basically where all the foreign kids come together.
It's like an English speaking
boarding school, I guess.
It's similar to a boarding school.
Yeah, something like that. And so that is something that you don't even have to, like, that's just a special circumstance. But if you are homeschooled, you have the opportunity to go out and do so many things that most kids can't because they have to work around the schedule. I know we were never the family that had perfect attendance because we had stuff that came up and we wanted to travel and go do these things.
You get to take your vacation the week before spring break.
So
Then nobody's out there.
Nobody's at the beach or wherever you're going,
exactly,
the amusement park, Walt Disney World.
Yep.
I was always jealous of that from some of my homeschool friends. So.
Yeah, that was where you mentioned this earlier, Tyce, and I'll go back to it. In my list of benefits, the family has a lot of freedom to do the unique things, but I was actually thinking about you can go teach your children about a science experiment in the wild. Like you could go to the woods and spend a day talking about leaves or bugs or whatever.
Yeah.
And you just wouldn't have that opportunity in a public school setting, or even maybe a Christian school setting.
That's true. Or even field trips to like factories or stuff.
Absolutely.
Like people love to give those. Like companies are just waiting for people to come in so they can show off what they have.
Yeah.
And that's a very special occasion for schools because it's a big deal to get a whole grade level to go do something. And with a family, they're happy to give a tour of 6 people anytime. Like you go to the morgue if you wanted, and they'll show you the morgue. I mean, it's anything.
Maybe not the dead body, but they'll show
maybe not the dead body, but
yeah.
I mean, they are just happy to, and that's just such an educational experience for kids.
It is.
And the co-op is that way too. I think that they do that kind of thing in co-ops. So.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so what about the potential detriments of homeschooling?
So I have a story. It's pretty funny. We had a kid who was homeschooled. He came to public school when his family moved to Missouri. And you talk about the bubble. This is one of your things. And there are just kids who live in a bubble. And he came to basketball practice. And he wanted to be on the basketball team. He played summer league. And he started out, like, one of his first things, he was like, I was top 50 point guard in the state of Texas when I was in school. Clark's already rubbing his eyes.
I know where this is going.
We're like, oh, that's pretty cool. He started playing, not good, terrible.
He might have been in the bottom 50.
Might have been in the bottom 50, but he would the passes that he would throw or like rolling the ball to you, like it was just, nothing was catchable, nothing was doable. And we come to find out through some digging and it was a few months later that we found out that he was top 50 in the point guard or the homeschool league in the state of Texas, which I don't even know. I don't know how you rate that, but so it's just in that. Well, there might be 50, but there's he wasn't like a homeschool. Like we have people at Cross Point who play in the public schools or play in the private schools and they get to play on those leagues. So his was like strictly homeschool league. And so it was like living in that bubble. You come in and you're just so excited, but you don't realize how much different it is in a public school or how much different it is other places. And so that can be a detriment because your kids come in so excited about the things that they got to experience or the things that they did. And then you get to public school and that can be popped real quick and realize either no one cares or you're in a bubble. And
I hope he's not watching this episode.
I doubt it, but
You have some some detriments. I'm sorry.
I do. And when I say the homeschooling done right can be the best option, I even think even homeschooling done right can have a couple detriments because none of the options are going to be perfect. We live in a fallen
none of them
world.
are perfect. That's right.
But one of the sad things I see happen a lot is people that, let's take this as an example. They have a third grade reading test, state standard test for public schools. And what you'll see happen sometimes is teachers will pull their student out for third grade, homeschool them for third grade, and then put them back in for fourth grade. So they don't have to take that test. And then they end up being below the reading level that they need to be at. And that's just an example, but it's unfortunately easy to kind of squeak by with homeschooling as far as, calling it education. Now, if you're doing it right, it's a different story. But I do think that that's one of the detriments and one of the downfalls.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had that in my list that children may not have educational metrics to evaluate their progress in a homeschooling environment. Now, we know, I think, several over the last few years of the National Spelling Bee winners and some of the highest national merit scholars have been homeschooled children. So done right, you can have some really incredible educational experiences. But if it's not done correctly, then your child could fall behind and you might not even know it until, say, they jump into some test they have to take. So I can see that as well. I do think the bubble issue is really significant, and it often leaves that child a little bit socially awkward, and the child may have a hard time relating to other kids or other people if there's not some interpersonal skills that are developed in addition to just the educational work that they're doing. And then the other probably detriment, I think, and this goes back to people who don't do it well, if the parents don't have a lot of self-discipline and they're trying to get their kid to do it and the kid doesn't want to, if the parent's not forceful, then the child may just not do the work. And the parent may say, oh, we'll do it tomorrow. And then the next day, well, we'll just do it next week. And all of a sudden, the work really doesn't get done that needs to get done to help the child achieve all the educational foundational points that they need to reach.
I do think that comes with even private school. There's just something about being around other kids. Every kid has a competitive nature of some sort, just a small one. And so that does come, like, maybe for some it's on the upper side and they're like, I really want to be valedictorian. And so they work all the time to get to that point. And others are like, man, I just want to be able to read like out loud when the teacher calls me and not be embarrassed. And that's something that they can work for because they know people around them are watching. And they're not competing against their little brother or sister that's 4 years younger than them. And they can read even 2 grade levels below what they're at. They're still reading better than their younger brother or sister. And so it's fine.
Yeah.
So
that's right. Okay. Last question. I know we've gone 32 minutes.
Yeah.
So Srav's giving us the sign that time's up.
Yeah. He's furious.
I do feel like that we need to speak real quickly. What are some parent things that they can do to ensure their children can function in adulthood with people they may or may not have met because of a homeschool environment? Because if it is a bubble and they don't have a lot of interaction, at some point they're going to become adults and they got to go get a job and they've got to report to work at 7 or 8 in the morning and work with people they've never seen before or interacted. What can parents be doing in the process of homeschooling to prepare them for that?
Get them involved in sports. That's my biggest thing. I mean, and don't be a coach of the team. Like, put them in it doesn't have to be some travel competitive, cost just $1,500 a year to play in. Yeah. There's a rec league, and let someone else coach and just expose them to other people's thoughts, expose them to someone that loves them because they love the children and want to help them, but doesn't see them as their own kid. And so they're willing to push them a little bit and care a little bit less about their feelings, which is hard to say. I know I don't have kids, but I know as a parent, even if you are pro, it's hard to see your kid get yelled at by someone else. There's a sense of wanting to come in and protect your kid, but sometimes that's just letting it happen. Or, I mean, if you can, go like as soon as they turn 14, I know you can get a work permit and put them in work somewhere. Let it be flexible because, I mean, they're still 14.
Right.
They're learning, but allow them to start working with other people and see what it means to be on a team.
That's good.
So,
you got one, Clark?
I don't have much to add to that. I think that was great.
Yeah,
but
I thought those were 2 good ones.
I will just say it doesn't even have to be a homeschool team either. Put them in anything because that was where I said even done right can be the detriment. I mean, if you're around like-minded people, you still aren't getting exposed to everything you could be at a public school.
Right.
So.
That's good. Okay. Well, we hope you've enjoyed today's table talk. So we know that we're in deep trouble with Sarav over our time element today, but I knew this was going to take us a little bit of time to get through. I hope you've enjoyed today's discussion, and we'll give you some food for thought in your process of deciding which type of school environment you're going to put your child in. And we hope you'll come back and join us for the next episode. Hope you have a great day.